I think my story that had so many ups and downs, there's some great lessons to be learned and lessons to avoid, hardships to avoid for the next generation of my mistakes.
You're coming off of covering an incredible World Series with Fox. Are the Dodgers bad for baseball or no?
Oh, no, they're great for baseball. I mean, they've taken over as what the Yankees held for the last century as the dominant franchise in the sport. Look, in any storytelling, any story and storytelling and strategy, you always need a Goliath, right? And they have incredible resources. They're the first team in the history of the sport to go over $1 billion in gross revenue in 2025, which is an enormous number. But like the Yankees, it's not just the resources, right? You have to be able to know how to deploy that capital and have sensitivities around roster construction. And Andrew Friedman, the head of baseball, the president of baseball operations there, has done a fantastic job just doing that. And back-to-back is so rare. It's only happened twice in 46 years.
Let's talk about the last team to do that, the Yankees. Your comments this year about the Yankees roster construction after the Blue Jays eliminated them were all over my social feed. I heard Brian Cashman here on WFAN in New York said that he reached out to Derek after Derek's comments, which Derek did preface that he had no insider info, but he was, of course, talking about the relationship between the front office and the coaching staff. For you, have you heard from Brian or from anyone else in the Yankees front office?
No, not at all. Look, I have a job to do, Ralphie, right? And my job is to tell exactly the audience on what I feel. And I don't think knowing all the information is really relevant in this case, because the truth is we haven't won a title in 16 years and we haven't been really close. I mean, if you call last year close, it was, the Dodgers pretty much, had their way with us. But no one cheers harder for the Yankees than I do. I want them to win. I want them to win badly. And I'm basically expressing what I hear from fans all around the world, the Yankee fans, the frustration, the anger. And yeah, I stand behind my comments.
All right, obviously co-owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx, in addition to, of course, your gig at Fox covering baseball. How worried are you about sports gambling right now?
This goes back to the late 1800s, right? I mean, it's been part of sports. Hopefully, what I'm optimistic about is that with new technology, AI, there's a lot more transparency. Something that could have lasted, 7 or 8 or a decade or 2 decades to figure out, we can figure out now in hours. So it's just a matter of we know what the problem, we know what the cause and effect is, but obviously we got to get more educated and make sure that, we protect the games and the leagues and the players.
All right. Last thing before I get into the doc, I mentioned the Lynx. Obviously, there's a CBA that's happening right now. There was just an extension until the end of November. What can you tell me, if anything, about those negotiations?
Yeah, not much right now. Honestly, I've been, as you've seen me on TV for the last, 5 weeks, I've been deep into baseball, and I haven't had my WNBA hat or NBA hat on, but in this week I'm going to start getting caught up with the league and everything that's been going on.
I think after that 18-inning game, you had like a 10 o'clock shadow when you got back to the desk by the time that was.
Yeah, it was. I felt like I aged. I mean, I was. It was such a great World Series that I was nervous for the players and really heartbroken for the Canadians. I mean, you had 41 million people watching a team that hadn't won in 32 years versus a team that was looking to repeat. And pre-game one, we were saying David versus Goliath. But the truth, by game 7, we were saying this is truly Goliath versus Goliath, right? And Canada against the U.S. And let's not feel sorry for the Blue Jays as far as finances. They also, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., their best player, earned a $500 million contract in which Toronto offered. So it was a remarkable World Series. Obviously, Ohtani and Yamamoto are unicorns and have done things that have never been done before, and we may never see again in the sport.
All right, 3-part doc here that we'll get part 1 coming up here on HBO. You could have done a 15-part doc on your life. You distill it down to 3. What was your goal in telling this story the way you told it?
Well, I think just the goal is, if you followed my career, it was full of highs and lows, and it was probably never boring. I wish it was a little bit more boring in retrospect, but you know, I think the goal was to finally tell my story and do it in my own words, and not hold back, and not do a puffy piece. As you saw, it really talked about a man that I think the line of the doc was by Mike Francesa when he said, Alex is, I'm paraphrasing, Shakespearean figure, but he's a very flawed man. And I think he's spot on. And I think that flawed man and the suspension led to a man that needed help. And I went into therapy with Dr. David. And he saved my life in many ways. And because of the big mistake, I was able to go back in and not fix the house, but like tear it down and start it again, and the rewiring of the brain. So, and this man just happened to have a baseball career. It's not a baseball career, right? It's really about the person who played baseball, who learned from his mistakes, and hopefully made the back nine of his life a lot better.
Let's talk about Mike for a second, because obviously he plays an instrumental part in this doc with his voice, but also, you know, that moment after you leave the courthouse with your then attorney, Joe Tacopina, Bud Selig is not there, Bud Selig is not coming. You are so irate, you go right to Mike's studios. He's live on the air, not just on WFAN, but being simulcast on the Yes Network, the Yankees TV network, where you air all of your grievances. As you relived all of this, what were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking. It was just the whole process was very frustrating at that time. And you know, if you have a do-over, obviously you don't make the mistake in the first place. And I thought that what Bud Selig was trying to sell was also way beyond anything that I had ever do or would ever do, right? You know, I think he mentioned, you know, Pablo Escobar and all kind of craziness. I mean, that was a bit of a reach, right? Or a lot of a reach. So that part was very frustrating. I wish I was able to, I wish I had the tools to be able to articulate and say some things like, you know, some of the things they're saying are true, but like 90% of the things they're reaching for is not true. And that would have been a more accurate story.
Obviously, the former commissioner, Selig, did not sit down for this. Neither did the current commissioner, who was a big part of that too, Rob Manfred. Did you ask him to sit down? Were there any conversations there or no?
I think Rob was just, you know, doing what his job was as, you know, the number two behind Bud. But the good news is Rob and I have developed a really strong relationship over the last decade. One of the things I really appreciate about Rob Manfred is when I did go into his office, we had a private meeting, and he said, look, Alex, I can promise you this. You serve your suspension, keep your head down, come back once you're done, and you'll have no scarlet letter. And to this day, we bonded over him being a man of his word.
Let me go to in this direction, because throughout a lot of this doc, you mentioned the Hall of Fame and the fact that because of your mistakes, you squandered that away. Going back to Joe Tacopina even, he made comments during a radio interview that implied that David Ortiz had used performance-enhancing drugs that put a strain on the relationship between the two of you. Not only did you bury the hatchet, but you actually went to Cooperstown in 2022 for his Hall of Fame induction. What kind of emotions were going through you as you went to celebrate a friend, but also visit a place that you had once hoped to be celebrated at?
No, yeah, just to make it clear, David and I never had one conversation, not one talk. Those were not my words.
Right, they're from your attorney. They're from your attorney.
Yeah, but again, it's something I never talked about with my attorney. I didn't know he was going to do that. David and I have been brothers since we were 17 years old. We both started with the Mariners, and we have never had one, not even one hiccup. So I went to the Hall of Fame because he's a dear friend, and I love him and I support him. But it had nothing to do with the side circus that was going on in that arbitration, which kind of took a life of its own. Yeah, so that was that.
Some of the people that we do hear from in this documentary, one being Derek Jeter. I know you sat down for his ESPN doc as well. What did that mean to you that Derek sat down and put his voice on this?
Well, I think it was really important. I mean, Derek is an institution himself, right? And what he's been able to do over his, you know, 20 plus year career was, nothing less than remarkable. One of the all-time great Yankees. It meant a lot, and I'm glad he did. And it also means a lot that we're working very closely together with Fox and trying to do good work. And I'm a big fan of Derek, and we've come a long ways.
What was it like to work with your daughters on this doc?
That was probably the highlight. It was a highlight. And I think that's where my therapy has really paid great dividends. My honesty with them, shortly after I got my suspension, and at that time there were, I don't know, somewhere like 11 and 8 or something like that, around that age. So as honest as you can be with an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, I think that paid great dividends.
And then we see Cynthia in this as well. And she mentions that the two of you have a really good co-parenting relationship right now. What was that like, getting her to sit down and then watching as she relived, some of this trauma that she was brought into as well?
I think she was a very important voice in this story because she was front and center. And, she's been my life partner now for, over around 30 years or so. And what we found is that we're best of friends, and we're great, great friends. We're better friends than we were a married couple. And she's a big part of my life today. She's an incredible mother. She'll be at the premiere tonight. And he's someone who has her master in psychology, and she was a big part of my life. And I have a tremendous deal of admiration and respect for her and her husband, Angel.
You mentioned that the two of you grew apart romantically. She mentions 2 incidents. The first, you apologize. The second, the divorce happens. We see some back pages, but you really don't get into any other detail as far as Madonna, who we see, at least on the back pages. You don't get into any detail either with Guy Osiri, her manager, who I believe you signed with after you parted ways with Scott Boras. We do hear about Scott in this doc. Why was that? Why did you not get into any detail with that particular part of your life here in this doc?
Yeah, I mean, I've never made it. I made it a habit not to talk about my personal life, as far as that part of it. And this was more a story that was based around baseball, my fall, and my lessons learned. And Guy's still a very close friend of mine.
We see you go through your late therapist's home, correct, during this? What was that experience like for you?
Oof. It was definitely triggering. We went back to his office. Dr. David, unfortunately, has passed a few years ago, and that was a tough blow. But Dr. David, in many ways, helped me rewire my brain. He helped me really understand some of the issues and challenges that I went and survived from being a younger kid. And he taught me some incredible lessons. And it was kind of nice to be back, but at the same time, it was also a little bit, sad because he's not here.
As a diehard Yankee fan myself, I even learned quite a bit watching this 3-parter, which I think is always key, in judging whether a doc is good or at least effective. I certainly learned about your therapy journey, which you opened up quite a lot about. I also learned about this meeting that you had at the Four Seasons before you signed with the Yankees, as Texas was looking to trade you, with Theo Epstein. And it happened here in New York, of all places. Why New York for that meeting, and why reveal it now?
Ralphie, I don't know what I had. It might have been my MVP banquet maybe that night that I received my first or second MVP, and I think I was just happened to be in New York.
Got it.
I think Theo might have been here in business, and we made it in the wee hours of the night because we wanted to be obviously super quiet about it. The commissioner's office had given us permission to speak, and I had had great conversations with the principal owner, John Henry, Larry Lucchino, who's no longer with us, who was a president at the time of the Red Sox and a brilliant baseball mind. And then obviously I met with Theo and Jed, his number 2. And it was very exciting. And we thought we did have a deal done. And unfortunately, the Players Union rejected that I was giving back too much money. I was conceding too much of my contract. And the they did not want to set the wrong precedent. I think it was an important part of my story on people like yourself who follow the Yankees, because I think that was a very important meeting, and then the rejection from the union kind of led me and opened the door for the Yankees.
Of course, then you go on to accept your MVP award. After a couple cocktails, you tell Brian Cashman, yes, I will move to third base. The third base opening, of course, happened because Aaron Boone, coming off of his postseason heroics, blew out his knee in a pickup basketball game. Do you ever wonder what would have happened to your life and career had Boone not played that game?
I mean, yeah, if you go back and say, what if this, what if that, my whole career, I might end up in Tokyo, I might end up in the NFL or something. So many twists and turns. And I think that's why, you know, Ralphie, when you think about telling my story, I thought it was important to hear from me, like, what was the evolution of my 23-year career, right? Because in so many ways, there's so many stories that are not true, so many stories that are true, and just to set the record straight. And most importantly, I think for the next generation of athletes and young people, I think my story that had so many ups and downs, there's some great lessons to be learned and lessons to avoid, hardships to avoid for the next generation of my mistakes.